Easy money. The words cut across the room like a dare, and the crowd laughed right on cue. Bianca stood at the center of the mat, one hand on her hip, the other pointing toward the back row where a black single dad sat quietly with his small son beside him. The man wore a faded work shirt and scuffed boots, the kind of clothes that said long hours and early mornings. He looked like every other tired father who had wandered into the wrong place on a Friday night, and that was exactly why she chose him. Nobody in that room objected. The man looked at his son, then looked at the mat, and said nothing at all. What happened next, nobody in that building was prepared for. Eli Carter had a system for Friday nights, and it never changed. He picked his son Marcus up from the after-school program by 5:30, stopped at the corner store for a bottle of grape juice and a bag of pretzels, and had dinner on the table before 7. After dishes, Marcus did his reading while Eli reviewed the week's invoices from the landscaping crew he ran 3 days out of 4. By 9, the boy was in bed. It was not a glamorous life, but it was a steady one, and Eli had learned the hard way that steady was worth more than most people realized. The exception to the system was the third Friday of the month, when Marcus had his junior martial arts class at the Riverside Community Center. Eli always stayed for the full session, watching his son move through drills with the focused expression of a child who took everything seriously. That part Eli understood. The repetition, the patience, the understanding that real skill lived in the fundamentals, not the flashy stuff. Tonight was different. The center was hosting an open showcase, local schools bringing their best students, and apparently some kind of open challenge segment at the end. Marcus had been asking about it for 3 weeks, and Eli had run out of reasons to say no. He found them seats in the back row and settled in with the quiet resignation of a man who had agreed to sit through something he did not particularly need to see. The first hour was fine. Kids performing forms, a judo demonstration, board breaks that made the crowd cheer louder than the skill probably warranted. Then Bianca stepped onto the mat, and the energy in the room shifted. She was introduced as the regional women's full contact champion, a 3-time gold medalist, and head instructor of a school called Apex Martial Arts. She was in her early 30s, athletic and precise, and she carried herself with the absolute comfort of someone who had never once doubted her place at the center of a room. The crowd responded the way crowds always respond to confidence, with immediate, uncritical enthusiasm. What followed was a series of challenge matches she had clearly done before. A young man went first and lasted about 40 seconds before she swept his legs and pinned him. A second volunteer made it closer to 2 minutes before a combination he never saw coming put him down. Bianca moved through both matches with clean efficiency, explaining her techniques to the audience like a professor walking through a lecture, which the crowd ate up completely. What the crowd did not know was that Bianca's school was in trouble. The rent on Apex was due in 18 days. Enrollment had dropped by 1/3. Tonight was not just a performance, it was an audition. She needed new students, and new students came from visible wins in front of large crowds. Every match tonight was advertising, and she needed one more, a convincing one, the kind that made parents think about signing their kids up on Monday. Eli was watching her footwork, the automatic habit of a man who had spent years assessing movement, when he noticed she was searching the crowd between matches. Not looking for the next challenger. Exactly, looking for the right one. There was a calculation in her eyes the showmanship was designed to obscure, and Eli recognized it because he had used that same calculation himself, in context she would never understand. When her gaze landed on him, he saw the moment she made her decision. He was the largest person in the back row, visibly working class, sitting quietly with a small boy. He did not look like a threat. He looked like a prop. "How about you?" Bianca said into the microphone, pointing directly at Eli. "Big guy in the back, you want to show your son something to remember?" The crowd turned. Marcus looked up at his father. Eli kept his expression neutral and shook his head once, the small definitive gesture of a man who meant it. "Come on," Bianca said, voice carrying the easy warmth of someone who had learned to perform generosity in public. "No pressure, just for fun. I'll even go easy on you." The crowd laughed. Eli did not find it funny, but he understood the mechanics of the moment well enough to know that arguing would only make it worse. He shook his head again, holding her gaze long enough to communicate that the answer was final. Bianca did not accept final answers from people who hadn't earned the right to give them. She walked closer to the crowd. "Scared," she said, and the single word landed in the room like a small explosion, detonating just enough laughter to fill every corner. Marcus made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Eli glanced at his son and saw the boy's jaw tighten, not with embarrassment, but with something older and quieter. The specific kind of hurt children feel when the world disrespects someone they love. Eli had never taught his son that dignity was something to surrender without cause. Bianca lifted the microphone again. "Tell you what," she said. "Sir, what's your son's name?" The question was a trap dressed as friendliness. Eli recognized it immediately. Marcus had gone very still beside his father, looking at him with an expression that carried no demand and no panic, just a question, open and honest. Eli sat with that look for 3 full seconds. Then he stood up. He took the pretzel bag from Marcus's hands, set it carefully on the seat beside the boy, and said, "Stay here," in a voice that was calm and absolute. Then he moved down the aisle toward the mat with the unhurried stride of a man who had decided something and was now simply executing it. Bianca smiled as he approached, the confident smile of someone who had already written the ending. "Welcome up," she said. Eli stepped onto the mat and turned to face her. He did not smile. He did not posture. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, his weight distributed evenly. Bianca registered the posture for half a second, dismissed it as amateur instinct, and turned back to the crowd. "Let's give him a hand before I humble him." The crowd obliged. Eli stood in the noise and said nothing. Bianca rolled her shoulders and moved into her stance with the smooth, practiced motion of someone who had done this 10,000 times. What she saw across the mat was a big man in work clothes, standing slightly wrong, breathing through his nose. What she did not see was the part of Eli Carter he had spent 4 years trying to leave behind. The part that had operated in places with no referees and no tap-outs. The part that had learned to read a room not for entertainment, but for threat assessment, currently running a quiet automatic inventory of exits, distances, and angles out of pure habit. Bianca studied him for a moment, and for the first time all evening, something almost imperceptible moved through her expression. Not doubt. Exactly. The faint instinctive awareness that this moment was not matching the pattern she expected. She had challenged a lot of volunteers. They all reacted the same way. Nervous, eager, performative. This man was simply standing there, looking at her, with dark, even eyes that held no fear and no performance of any kind. It lasted only a second. Then the crowd cheered again, and Bianca let the sound carry her back into the role she knew how to play. She moved forward. Eli watched her come, and did not move a muscle. She came in fast, an aggressive opening combination designed less to land clean and more to read how a person moved under pressure. A jab to test the distance, a low kick, a lateral step. Eli slipped the jab by moving his head exactly far enough and no further. He absorbed the low kick without shifting his weight. When she stepped laterally, he turned with her, maintaining the same distance as if the space itself were fixed. He did not counter. He simply adjusted, absorbed, and waited, and the whole sequence happened so quietly that most of the crowd missed what it meant. What the crowd saw was a big man taking hits and not falling down, which they interpreted as stubbornness. They laughed, encouraged by Bianca's composed expression. She threw a sharper combination, jab, cross, body kick, working now with genuine intent. The cross caught Eli on the shoulder. The body kick landed against his forearm, the deflection so economical it barely registered as a block. The crowd began to cheer harder, reading the action as a dominant performance. Near the side wall, a thick-necked man in his mid-50s stood with his arms crossed, watching in complete silence. He was watching Eli the way someone watches a thing they are trying to identify carefully. In the back row, Marcus had not moved from his chair. Where the crowd saw a man absorbing punishment, he saw something else. Something in the angle of his father's shoulders he had no words for yet, but recognized the way children recognize things that are true before they can explain why. Bianca reset and came forward with her signature combination, the one she had closed every match with tonight. A feint left, a committed right hook, a sweep kick aimed at the back of the lead leg, then a standing arm lock. She had landed it 4 times in the last 3 weeks. She threw it now with the full weight of her confidence. Eli stepped inside it, not away from it. He stepped directly into the pocket of the combination, inside the arc of the hook before it could generate force, and the sweep kick caught nothing but air because his lead leg had already moved. His left hand came over her extended arm at the elbow, not a grab, just a redirect, and Bianca felt her own momentum carry her forward and down in a direction she had not chosen. She got a foot under herself and recovered, but the recovery cost her a full step backward, and the arm lock position she had set up was completely gone. She stood 3 feet back and looked at Eli across the mat. He had not moved from the spot where he was standing. The crowd took a moment to catch up to what had happened, and when they did, the sound in the room changed. The laughter dropped out of it. Near the side wall, the thick-necked man uncrossed his arms. Bianca registered the shift the way all experienced competitors register changes in momentum, immediately and physically. She came forward again, faster this time, the performance aspect of her movement almost entirely gone. This was not demonstration anymore. Her students were watching. Her name was on a banner above a door that needed to survive the next 18 days. She threw hard and fast, pushing the pace beyond what she had used against anyone else tonight, and for 30 seconds, it was genuinely one-sided. Eli gave ground, moving backward in a controlled retreat that kept him just outside her most effective range. The crowd read the retreat as desperation, but Eli was not retreating because he was losing. He was retreating because he was measuring. In the brief intervals between exchanges, something was happening behind Eli's eyes that had nothing to do with the gym or the crowd. It was closer to the activation of a layer of his nervous system that had been deliberately dormant for 4 years, a layer that processed distance, timing, structural vulnerabilities, and optimal response windows with the cold efficiency of something trained past the point where conscious thought was fast enough to be useful. He was trying to keep it contained. The restraint was costing him. Every time the instinct surfaced and he pushed it back down, he absorbed something he would not have absorbed otherwise. He was making a choice, over and over, to stay inside the version of this fight that did not end with someone going to the hospital. Bianca hit him with a clean elbow strike to the side of his head that landed harder than either of them expected, and Eli felt the familiar compression of impact. He took 2 steps back. The crowd erupted.
She'll press the advantage immediately, coming in with full commitment, her best and heaviest combination, the kind of sequence that ended fights at the regional level.
Eli caught the first strike on his forearm, redirected the second across his body, and the third, a straight right hand aimed at his jaw, he moved away from by the exact distance required, no more. The momentum of her committed strike pulled her weight forward, and in that fraction of a second, while her balance was ahead of her feet, Eli's right hand found her collar, his left hand found her sleeve, and Bianca felt the floor come up at an angle she had not agreed to. She caught herself on one knee, but her arm was already controlled, her posture already broken. She tried to roll out of it, and Eli followed the roll, maintaining control without increasing pressure, patient in a way more unsettling than aggression would have been. The room was very quiet. Marcus had both feet flat on the floor now, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching his father's hands with an expression of absolute recognition. Bianca understood, in the particular clarity that comes only when the body has run out of options, that she was not in a competition anymore. She only knew that the man controlling her arm had not raised his voice, had not changed his expression, had not wasted a single movement in the last 60 seconds, and was waiting for her to reach the same conclusion he had apparently already reached before she did. Eli held the position for 2 more seconds, then adjusted his grip in a way that communicated, without words or force, that the next movement was hers to choose. Bianca stopped moving. Eli released the control hold in a single clean motion and stepped back, giving her room to stand without making a production of it. He did not offer a hand up. He simply moved back 2 steps, giving her room to collect herself on her own terms, which was the only kind of dignity available to her now. Bianca got to her feet, straightened her uniform, and turned to face Eli. The expression on her face was not the one she had worn at the beginning of the night. It was simpler and harder, the expression of someone standing in the specific wreckage of an assumption they had built their entire evening on. "You win," she said, loudly enough to carry. 2 words, flat and undecorated. A few people applauded, uncertain at first, and then the applause became genuine because the room recognized that what they had just witnessed was real in a way the earlier matches had not been. Eli gave a single nod. That was all. Before Bianca could say anything else, quick footsteps crossed the gym floor. Marcus was there, wrapping both arms around his father's midsection with the full-body commitment that only children and people in genuine relief could manage. Eli caught him with one arm, the other hand coming up to the back of the boy's head. Marcus pressed his face against his father's chest. "I thought you weren't going to do that anymore." The sentence landed in the room and stayed there. Eli looked down at his son, and something moved across his face, not quite a smile. The expression of a man confronted with evidence that the people closest to him had always seen him more clearly than he had managed himself. The thick-necked man near the side wall stepped forward. "Where did you serve?" he said, direct and without ceremony, the question of someone who already knew the shape of the answer. Eli looked at the man. Something passed between them, a recognition of shared language that had nothing to do with words. "Naval Special Warfare," Eli said, "separated 4 years ago." The man gave a short nod. He said nothing further, but he did not look away. The announcer, standing at the edge of the mat, repeated the words into the open air without quite meaning to. "Naval Special Warfare." And then the crowd caught it, understanding moving through the room in a wave, the murmur rising as people turned to confirm with the person next to them what they thought they had just heard: a Navy SEAL. The man in the faded work shirt, who had sat in the back row with his son and a bag of pretzels, who had declined twice to stand up right up until the moment declining was no longer the right answer. The man Bianca had pointed at and called Easy Money. Bianca stood in the center of the mat and heard the room process this, and the experience was not what she might have predicted. It wasn't his background that had beaten her. It was the fact that she had looked at a stranger and decided in 3 seconds that she understood everything about him. The background only explained the mechanism. The lesson was about the assumption. She looked at her students in the 3rd row, watching her with the careful attention of young people trying to learn something from a situation their teacher had not planned. She had taught them to assess and respond, to never underestimate reach and experience. She had not taught them formally about the things she had just demonstrated at her own expense, the way confidence could become a blindfold if you wore it too long without taking it off. Eli adjusted his jacket and steered Marcus toward the exit with a hand on the boy's shoulder. They moved through the edge of the crowd, people shifting to make room in the instinctive way crowds make room for things they suddenly understand differently. Nobody stopped them. Near the door, Marcus looked up at his father. "Are you sorry you did it?" the boy asked, his voice genuine and clear-eyed, trusting the answer to be honest. Eli considered the question for the length of 3 steps. "I'm sorry I got pushed to that point," he said. "That part I could have handled better." He looked at his son to make sure the boy was tracking. "But standing up when someone decides they can use you without consequence? No, I'm not sorry for that." Marcus turned this over seriously, without rushing. Then he nodded once, with the decisive quality of a child filing something away for keeps. They pushed through the exit door, into the cool night air. Eli let the door fall shut behind them. Inside, the noise of the crowd was already rebuilding, voices rising and intersecting, everyone reaching for the same story from different angles. The name Eli Carter would mean something in that building it had not meant 2 hours ago. Eli found this neither satisfying nor troubling. He had come here for the boy walking beside him, whose hand had found his again somewhere in the parking lot with the casual certainty of a child who knew where safety was. The truck started on the first turn of the key. Marcus buckled his seatbelt and ate a pretzel with the philosophical calm of a child who had processed the evening and arrived at a satisfactory conclusion. Eli pulled out of the lot and drove. Behind them, the lights of the community center shrank in the rearview mirror and disappeared around the corner. The most dangerous person in that building was on his way home to check the week's invoices and make sure his son was in bed before 9:15. Nothing about that had changed, except that somewhere back in that gym, a woman was sitting with her students and looking at the mat with new eyes, and a room full of people had learned something no curriculum had prepared them for, that the person least interested in proving what they were capable of was sometimes the one you most needed to pay attention to. Eli drove home through streets that did not know his name, and that was exactly the way he wanted it. The most dangerous person in the room is usually the one with nothing to prove.